it's a money fight, I get you, and you want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big-time boxer / fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age who is a contender at the very least.
Paul fight announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
Fight that I couldn't believe, that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025. Remind you that combat sports are the craziest sports on the planet.
Boxing fans, get ready because the most shocking fight announcement of the year just dropped. Jake Paul versus Gervonta Tank Davis. Yes, you heard that right. A YouTuber turned boxer stepping into the ring with one of the most feared knockout artists in the world. Let's break it all down. Stephen A. Smith wasted no time in blasting this fight. He called Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis nothing more than a circus act. Sure, Jake knows how to promote himself and sell a spectacle, but Smith says boxing deserves real matchups, not just shock value. In his view, Jake should be fighting opponents that actually make sense, not chasing headlines.
I've always been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon, he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers. But then again, should he? Because I'll tell you why. If you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, and you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic about this shit. Jake's 25, 26. He's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody really skilled.
The analyst echoed the same thoughts. They say Jake Paul's entire boxing career feels like a string of circus fights. Instead of testing himself against fighters who match him in weight or style, Jake keeps choosing unusual opponents. Yes, it entertains people, but it doesn't feel like real competition.
Performance. Jake Paul won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. The charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he'd lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire as he was experiencing extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over him. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money, fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul, was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time or mine critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it pits Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds. And Tank Davis, who is, he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly, 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" at best. So, there's a height disparity there of some 8 inches.
And came the bombshell. Ring Magazine confirmed Jake Paul versus Gervonta Tank Davis, November 14th, State Farm Arena, Atlanta. The fight will stream globally on Netflix as an exhibition. The announcement shook the internet, especially when fans realized Jake last fought at 200 pounds, while Tank is a 135 lb lightweight champion. The size difference alone has people debating, is this even fair? But love him or hate him, Jake Paul continues to shock the sport. He's investing his own money, pushing his wild dreams. and pulling it off in ways nobody thought possible.
But again, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And we've seen that Jake will kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people, but at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight, and be like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fight. And he'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever. But Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love. And you have these talks about him fighting and you doing, myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years. So it's a weird spot to be in for him, for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public, from Eddie Hearn, from Jake. Nakisa Badarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over broadcasting issues.
Jake himself poured fuel on the fire with his Instagram post. Size versus speed. Power versus precision. One will rise, one will fall. Live from Atlanta. The hype skyrocketed. Legendary trainer Teddy Atlas also weighed in, saying whether you like Jake or not, he deserves credit for making these fights happen. It takes persistence, money, and risk, and Jake has improved a lot as a boxer. Atlas admitted Paul trains with real pros, spars with killers, and has earned his place as more than just a YouTuber.
That I gave too much credit to Paul. Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself. He sold his dream. He took his dream. He took his idea. He put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. And he made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background and the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that you got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he's worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I'm also, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step. Where you could twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that with the understanding too that Joshua's coming off being knocked out.
But not everyone is buying it. Talk Sport slammed the fight as completely unbalanced. Their biggest issue, the massive weight gap. Tank Davis is a natural 135, destroying opponents in his division. Jake, on the other hand, is walking around at nearly 200 pounds. To them, this isn't just unfair, it's dangerous. Critics argue Jake keeps picking smaller opponents, older fighters, or guys outside boxing. Davis may be in his prime, but the size gap makes it feel like another setup.
Netflix, and that's probably where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it, is a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. The guy's my height. He's 5'5", and Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. He walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, so that you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay, if you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5" and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Gervonta Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you got a guy of 5'5" boxing a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight, yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I thought if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself, and that sort of made sense. And it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion. He gets a little bit of credibility, and you go, right, now you're heading in the right direction.
Boxing scene analyst agreed, saying the risk is all on Gervonta Davis. If Tank loses, people will say it was because of the size difference. If he wins, critics will dismiss it, arguing Jake was never an elite boxer. Either way, Tank gets little credit. It's a lose-lose situation for him, which makes fans question why this fight is happening at all.
I'd say it's win-win for Gervonta as much as it is for Jake. Jake, it's like, okay, you're fighting a former world lightweight champion. You're bigger, so you have some advantages, even if you're, at a severe skill disadvantage. You're not supposed to expect to do anything, but if you do, it's even, it's bananas for you. It's great. Gervonta, I don't know. What if Jake hits him? Jake's a big guy. I don't know if Gervonta stood next to Jake. Jake's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah.
And Gervonta is small even by lightweight standards.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a David and Goliath fight. It's just, the David character in Gervonta is much, much more skilled. But I guess there's that's the thought process. As far as what it does for boxing, well, absolutely nothing. But then again, what have Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul really done for boxing in the ring aspect? Because Jake, I am a believer in Jake as a promoter, and I think that he has a future as a promoter, and I think he's done very well as a promoter, and I think his company has done some very good things for the sport, and for young fighters, and for brewing talent and making good fights on that basis. But as far as from fighters' perspective, what they do for boxing from a fighter's perspective, I don't think Gervonta Davis has ever done anything for boxing, honestly. Like I feel like TV has just in this generation, they just create stars, and then they just tell you, okay, we're gonna make this guy the star. It's like they're pre-created, and then they just tell you.
Critics also point to Jake Paul's power in boxing not from rankings, but from money. He controls fights with his financial clout, forcing matchups that would never happen otherwise. From Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. to now Gervonta Davis, Jake has shown he can bend the sport to his will. Traditional fans see this as damaging skipping, weight classes, rankings, and the system that boxing is built on.
Here we go again, people. Another Jake Paul fight, another embarrassing night for boxing. Said this a few times now, and I'm really getting sick of it. 10 rounds of tediousness, whereby Jake Paul was just, I say throwing punches, a lot of them didn't have any zip on them against an opponent that was just compliant. He holds boxing in contempt. He's basically pimping the sport. That's what Jake Paul is doing. And I find it unacceptable, I really do. The whole Jake Paul brand is actually bad for boxing. Taking advantage of the sport, pimping the sport, fighting washed up MMA fighters, former fighters, and now we're hearing that he's about to enter the WBA rankings and could be in line for a world title shot. Absolute farce. He couldn't get away with it in any other sport, and that's what makes me so mad.
Woodley, twice, big numbers. Jake Paul fought against Tommy Fury, big numbers. Jake Paul, who I believe, and I have told you guys this time and time again, he's much better than people give him credit for. One, Jake Paul is not an amateur fighter, like some try to say. Jake Paul has money, so Jake Paul is getting trained by the best boxing coaches that money can buy. He's full-time boxing. There are a lot of people that say he may do some other stuff. I don't know who he was going to fight that was saying that he was juiced up and he was ignoring him. Or was it Logan Paul? One of them. But at the end of the day, this kid's training to be the best fighter in the world, or the best as he can be, and he understands what losing would do to the perception of who he is in fighting. We were yelling so much about him fighting someone. Fight somebody your size. Fight somebody, a real boxer. Stop fighting MMA guys. There were so many things that people were mad about in regards to his level of competition and the people he was competing against. Well, today we learned that Jake Paul has his next opponent. His next opponent is by far the most credentialed guy actively. Many of want to jump down my throat and say, well, Mike Tyson is actively.
And then came Carl Froch Savage take. The former champ called the whole thing an absolute joke. He revealed Jake was this close to fighting Anthony Joshua in a heavyweight showdown, yet instead, he chose Davis, a fighter literally half his size. Froch says it proves Jake isn't chasing legacy, he's chasing shock value. Whether you agree or not, one thing is clear. This fight has everyone talking dots, so what do you think? Is Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis the fight boxing needs or the biggest circus act in history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more boxing breakdowns. This is just the beginning.